Okay, so are we all back? Please just write a yes in the group chat so that we know that you're all back. Oh yeah, okay. Okay, so in that case, would any of the teams like to start the debate? If not, we'll pick at random. I'll just probably grab a roulette and we'll do the roulette. But basically, I'll be like timing your speeches. So introduction, we said was 2 minutes. Arguments are 5 minutes collectively. Rebuttals are also 5 minutes collectively, and conclusion is 3 minutes collectively, approximately. If we see that there's many people who want to speak, many opinions, and we've got time, we can make it a little bit longer. Having said that, let me just pull up the roulette real fast.
I mean, I could like our team can go first.
Okay, in that case,
To avoid wasting time. So
for sure. So let me just pull up the timer.
okay, let me know when.
Okay, so whenever you're ready, do you want me to give you a countdown or?
Sure.
Okay, so in 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so we believe that it's unfair to impose tighter restrictions on immigration into Europe because it does not like address or resolve the issue of Islamist radicalism, because obviously it's present not only in Europe but everywhere, like in Middle Eastern countries and Muslim countries, everywhere like that. So even while acknowledging the complexities that come with immigration and the current refugee crisis, we must not induce fear to those who are coming into new lands seeking better opportunities or safety from areas that are like plagued by conflict. So through like diplomatic dialogue, we advocate for an open-minded exploration of the benefits of cultural exchange, the contributions of diverse communities, and the fundamental principles that like bind us together as a global society. Firstly, we're going to argue how like tighter restrictions may impose humanitarian threats than like the economic threats, the economic effects in the host countries with job shortages, because obviously a lot of European countries are like suffering from job shortages. So, or like just people who don't want to work. So obviously immigrants take jobs that a lot of Europeans don't want to do, such as like construction, stuff like that. And we need to foster an atmosphere of understanding and cooperation. We can strive towards a more harmonious and equitable world for all, irrespective of religious or cultural background. So obviously, we believe that uh, the the problem of radicalization in Europe isn't necessarily from like obviously not everyone is a social is a radical like Islamist. So I think if we impose tighter restrictions from like these Muslim countries, it's unfair for those seeking a better life and actually seeking safety from like these countries that obviously are like hindered by conflict, and like a lot of children as well. Like most of like a big part of the population of these Muslim countries are like children, young people who don't have access to educations and stuff like that. And these are countries that once had like really good literacy rates and like really good education. And since the conflicts began, like whether that's with like the Soviet Union in like 1977 um, or like the USA, which is a big one, like these young people and children don't have access to any more education, stuff like that. And so a lot of them are looking for better opportunities. And so we believe that there's like a better and more fair way to combat radicalism in Europe without like depriving those who actually seek safety um, in Europe. So I
Okay,
yield
thank you.
my time.
Okay, that was good. It was a little overtime, but
Oh my
it's
bad.
good. It's okay. Now the team in favor, if you could start introducing your stands.
Sure. Okay.
Oh wait, let me give you a countdown. Hold on. Okay, in 3, 2, 1, go.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the debate. in the area of increasing immigration and continuous radicalism of the Islamic population, that we have come to the question of whether Europe should impose tighter immigration restrictions on Islam predominant countries. Our team sadly and forcibly only can be in favor of this idea that this act would not only maintain domestic justice, the fairness among all citizens, and in fact that it will improve the unemployment rate and the economic situation, and that the radicalism of Islamic population are not justified in a manner of violence. Our team are fully aware of the complexity of this topic and should be following the principles of human rights. Sorry. Okay, Albert, I think that's it. I cannot continue anymore.
Okay, so that was a little under time, but it's also okay. You'll be penalized later in the evaluation, just slightly, both teams, but it's okay. Having said this, now the team against has 5 minutes collectively. So you can have many speakers, more than one, to talk about your arguments against imposing tighter controls. So tell me whether you're ready.
If my teammates agree, I think that I could begin, and if they believe that they want to add something, well, they're glad to agree. To add something new, but basically, with our team, we have prepared three arguments. First, our team is completely against dire restrictions on immigration from Muslim countries. We support this claim through a humanitarian argument, a social argument, and a socio-economic argument. Beginning with the humanitarian argument, Europe this nowadays enjoys a peaceful climate that sadly is not shared with many Muslim countries, and hence Europe can provide a safe climate for families that have been trapped in a hostile country and that currently they are posing a threat to their safety, and Europe can give them the chance to be able to raise their children in a safe country. And also following the social argument, this supports the fact that Europe is formed by many diverse countries with different cultures and language who are still able to cohabitate, and hence Europe has the capacity of promoting the integration of Muslim individuals who should not be reduced to their religion but treated like equal. And finally, with the socioeconomic argument, this defends the fact that many European countries actually suffer from labor shortages in different areas, such as construction workers in Spain. So the immigration can be beneficial and support the development of the European countries if they promote laboral insertion measures. I don't know if my teammates want to add something more.
Um, Also, so we believe that obviously, like imposing tighter restrictions does not resolve the problem. We believe that there's other ways, such as, for example, in Denmark, I'm pretty sure it is that immigrants, like it's compulsory for immigrants to take lessons about like the culture in like Denmark and stuff like that. And I think that should be something that should be implemented in more countries, because obviously like it's important to understand like the crucial no the like the cultural differences between obviously these like Muslim countries and Europe, because Europe is a very like liberty of expression, like freedom of rights, stuff like that. And I think it's important that immigrants take lessons about kind of like getting used to like the cultural change in Europe. And so we believe that that's like a better way to um, obviously generate like peace in the region um, and like reduce is like radicalism, because obviously a lot of this radicalism like is rooted from the freedom of expression, and like the fact that, for example, in France they're able to show like caricatures like even for educational purposes, or like the fact that in Europe it's so open to whatever whatever everyone feels. And kind of like these immigrants aren't like, they're not used to this like openness and this like freedom. So I think it's important that lessons and stuff like that get integrated so that there's more of a cultural balance.
Yeah, because Europe absolutely has the capacity to overcome these small cultural clashes and promote the cohabitation between different cultures.
Yeah, I just think to conclude, like everything that has been said, we think it's super unethical and it goes completely against our principles, tightening the restrictions of immigration for Muslim countries. We think that considering the fact that these immigrants contribute so much to the workforce and they offer diversity in our community, offer different cultures. So instead of tightening the restrictions, it would be a better idea to work on education, awareness, intercultural understanding, and creating like these inclusive communities through like integrational programs, which like fosters a sense of belonging for these people who come and seek a better life in the European nation. Right? I think the time's up, so I'll leave it there.
You've got 30 seconds left. Here, Fox.
Okay. So yeah, basically, like we said, we need to find like a balance of safety and community and respecting everyone's rights, because not letting people into our like countries just because of their backgrounds, their beliefs, their religions, like their nationalities, it's completely against our ethical like properties and principles. So because of that, we think that there are other approaches that we can take, more ethical and more fair approaches that will better our community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, the team in favor, you have 5 minutes to collectively present your arguments. Um, yeah, the time. Well, are you ready?
Who wants to start? Who? I mean, it can be me, Jerome. Jerome, you want to start? If not, I'll start.
No, Mark, I think I could tell you're passionate. You can start. You can
I'll
start.
start.
I think you start.
Okay, so you're going to be starting in three, two, one. You've got the floor.
I'd like to start by addressing some of the points made near the end of the other team's speech by Diego, which is the fact that we can take other approaches um, in order to, fulfill supposedly um, what is said by the EU, or what is claimed by the EU, which is that we have freedom of expression. And so these immigrants should be, or freedom of immigration as well. So these immigrants should be allowed in. Now, what I'd like to say to that is if supposedly we'd like to have these people better integrated into society, if going by the example of the French teacher who was brutally murdered, beheaded, after showing a caricature of Muhammad, the prophet of the Islamic religion, in a simple classroom setting, um, somehow, if we can get these Muslims better integrated, specifically Muslims in this case, better integrated by perhaps not showing these caricatures, but doing that inherently compromises these same values, as then we are not allowed freedom of expression. Instead, we are not allowed to show these caricatures. Whereas if we were to do it with Jesus Christ, then it's okay, supposedly, or if we were to do it with Buddha, nobody would respond. But if it's with the Prophet Muhammad, the teacher gets beheaded. That is inherently compromising our own values in itself. I'd like to also expand on my own team's arguments. Firstly, by stating the argument of safety, firstly, which immigration, despite the fact that it may not be fully rooted in immigrants, immigration is ultimately what leads to Islamic radicalization. And whereas it might not be the greatest thing to send these immigrants back to their home countries, we can help them by, instead of letting them in and then dealing with the problems they cause here, help them develop their own home countries and solve the root cause, which is them immigrating from those root countries. Now, if anybody else from my team wants to speak, go ahead. If not, I'll keep going.
I'll go.
Go ahead.
So, in continuation from what my partner Mark has already mentioned, I would also like to add on that the other team has brought up the point of ethicality and whether it's truly ethical to send back these immigrants back to their war zone countries, and whether or not this is the truly best method of dealing with this sort of issue. To that, I would like to point out that what's more important, the values and the cultures of European society or those of Muslim or Islamic societies? I would say that, or I would argue, since it's based on the question, that European societies have more value and more culture, and therefore we should prioritize the protection of European society. And in doing so, if we have to send back some immigrants, and while of course it is tragic and it isn't the best method of doing so, it is of course the I would say it is the best method in order to protect European society and citizens that live inside of it. And yeah, I would say while and that's how I would rebuttal the argument made by the opposing team questioning the ethicality of sending back these immigrants. And my partner Mark will expand a little bit more on that. I think, yeah.
First, Mr. You want to speak first since I've already spoken. You haven't spoken yet.
So looking to the ethicality, well, these countries like they're at war, and well, I don't feel like it's conductive to ending the war if all of the people who are against the war are leaving the country. Just means that a lot more of the country is made up by people who are pro-war, and furthermore, like the immigrants who come from war-torn countries, they're not necessarily a majority. Like a lot of these cases of Islamists are come from Tunisia or like other countries who are not at war, they happen to be Muslim but they're not at war. Um, Second of all, well, there's an argument to be made about that all cultures are precious and ought to be protected, and there's several projections that predict that Europeans will become a minority in Europe based on the fertility rates and the immigration rates. And so, a question to you guys is basically, why is there a solution to make it easier for them to come to Europe as opposed to making it easier for them to stay in their home countries, considering that most of them would prefer to stay in their home countries if they could?
Okay, now I'd like to slightly add on to slash rephrase what my partners have already said. First, with regard to Jerome and the ethical nature of the whole situation, um, he's not saying Muslim cultures are less valuable. Instead, he's saying that as we're talking about Europe, from Europe's perspective, Europe would feel it is more necessary to protect European culture and European values from their own perspective. But in restricting immigration, we are doing both. We are also protecting the culture of the other party, which is those who immigrate, by having them instead have a better chance of staying in their own country and developing their own culture there, rather than having to put up with our culture, which they may not really want to do. That's it.
Okay, thank you for the team in favor. Now the team against has 5 minutes collectively in order to answer to everything that the team in favor has said and rebut the arguments. So tell me whenever you're ready so I can set a timer.
Carla, if you want to go first.
Sure.
Okay.
If my teammate,
Oh, sorry.
no,
You
if my
wanna?
teammates want to add anything, please just go on and they can cut me. But yeah, I'm ready. So if the timer's on, I think that the team in favor of the measures first mentioned the beheading of the teacher because many Muslim immigrants have a lot of clashes with the fact that in Europe we promote a lot the freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is not the main clash with the Muslim communities, but instead is the fact that we must promote this freedom of expression and we be able to give each other feedback in a very respectful way, because in the end it's not the fact of that we can say anything about Mohammed, it's how we say it. We must remain respectful to other cultures, just as we expect the Muslim community to be respectful towards the European community. Later they have given the great solution of actually improving the climate in the countries that are war on or in hostile environments, because yes, most of these immigrants do want to stay in their home countries, and this team absolutely agrees with the fact that there must be international cooperation to ensure that all countries in future become safe for their citizens. But sadly, this is not the current situation. So we must think of long-term solutions like the ones proposed from the team in favor, but we must also create present solutions that will ensure the current safety of the citizens. Because while we work on creating this international safe environment, we must be also able to ensure the current present safety of the citizens in those countries. And for that, while we create this safe international environment helping these countries, we can also bring their citizens to Europe for a temporal, say, expansion of time, to ensure that while we create these measures, their safety is not in danger. And moving on, this is not an us Europeans against them Muslims. It's a matter that we must not also promote European values throughout Europe as superior or prevalent, but we must because this will create a hostile environment that will not promote any cultural understanding. Instead, we should promote that yes, there's Europe, we have our values. We pray that the Muslim communities are comprehensive with this, but we must not totally impose our culture to those individuals. I don't know if my teammate wants to add something.
Yeah, just something like, for example, okay, going back to like the attacks in France because of like Charlie Hebdo and the caricatures and stuff like that. Obviously, obviously, like freedom of expression is promoted in Europe, but I think there's a limit because obviously, in order for you can't expect two groups to integrate if neither group respects each other. So I think, for example, obviously in Islam, it's obviously prohibited to show, there are no images of the Prophet Muhammad, and it's prohibited to uh, like characterize the Prophet Muhammad. And so I think there's um, obviously even for like educational purposes, especially seeing as there's like quite a big Muslim population in France. um I think it's essential to kind of like look ahead at um how like showing these, even for like educational purposes, how it can be like detrimental and the effects that it could cause. And obviously we saw the effect that it caused with like the teacher being beheaded, and obviously a lot of different attacks. So I think obviously freedom of expression is like an essential right in Europe, and like I believe in freedom of expression. I think you should be able to express your opinion freely, but I think there has to be like kind of a level of respect, especially knowing the amount of immigrants that come into Europe from Muslim countries. It's essential to respect their culture if you want them to respect yours. So I think obviously that's like a big point that I think should also be like talked about in like governments and stuff like that, about like just having like an overall respect. Because obviously if we respect the religion and we don't kind of like we don't like joke around with it, and we don't kind of like characterize like Muhammad or stuff like that, I think it would be like a more peaceful. So, Diego, if you want to say something.
Yeah, so like my teammate mentioned, it's important that people are educated and are like in those like are exposed to these different cultures, because like that's what we want to create, like a sense of unity in a community. um and also we think that it's important to support like religious freedom and like its practices, right? So like that could be like ensuring the protection of these sacred places, the protection of like religious freedoms, while also like emphasizing the shared values that like people in the community can share. um Also like facilitating the construction of mosques, for example, and other like religious spaces will like also in will also like boost the sense of religious freedom in a community, which is like what we want, because we want to also like make people feel like welcome, and we want them to have a sense of belonging, which is like our integration program, which is what we were talking about previously, having like people be educated on the diversity and like how these. I'm gonna give Tao like the final seconds of our time so he can finish it up.
I mean, I think just like adding on, for example, like the mosques and stuff like that, since like religious, like practicing religion in public is like prohibited, at least it is in France. um it's important that like we give these people a place to worship and that we don't like destroy, because obviously that's, if you come to a country and you're not allowed to practice your religion in public, but you're given no place to practice your religion, obviously that's going to cause a little, like that's going to cause animosity and stuff like that. And so I think it's essential to kind of also adapt European society to make it easier for these immigrants to not resort to violence, such as like the burning down of mosques, I mean, of churches or stuff like that. So I think both parties have to work together to kind of, yeah. If you want to say something in 1 second.
In the end, this is like the final statement is just about respecting each other, like you would do with any other fellow European, respecting each other's ideology.
Okay, thank you, team against. Now, the team in favor will also have 5 minutes approximately to state their points collectively. So I believe you can start doing that in 3, 2, 1. You got the floor.
Okay, I guess I'll go. Right, so I'd like to touch on a lot of the things that the other team said, beginning with the fact that there's a limit to freedom of expression, which, yes, of course, there is. To a certain extent, we have to be respectful to the beliefs of others. But I'm going to bring it back to him saying that the caricature shown of Muhammad is supposedly past the limit of freedom of expression, or is somehow um, too much for these Muslims to deal with, as it goes against their core values. Now, if your proposal is to educate them on the inclusivity and diversity of European society, um, probably a lot of the things that you're going to teach them supposedly will go against their values. Um, and that includes a lot of things. I mean, just the notion of Christianity, homosexuality, evolution as a concept. All of that is going to go against their values. And if they want to live here, they're going to have to cope with it. So if even educating them on that is going to go against their beliefs, is that also past the limit of freedom of expression? Another point mentioned by the other team is that we have to adjust our own European society in order for these immigrants to feel more at home. One of their main points was about mosques in France, a country which has over 2,000 mosques for a fraction of their population. So certainly that's not the problem, and that's not what's making them resort to burning churches. It's radicalization. So rather than having to adapt our own culture and our own society in order to have them feel more at home, why don't we adapt their own society and their own culture and help them feel more at home where they should feel more at home, which is what we've said, which is the notion of eliminating the root cause, which is the war-torn countries from which they arrive into Europe, and the main reasons why they have to immigrate in the first place. Um, yeah, that's one of the points. Now, another point made by the other team, or just a point that I want to make in general, is that going past the limit of freedom of expression is, for example, if we say that it is okay to, or what's happening right now with certain activists in favor of Palestine who are saying to, commit genocide or denying the Holocaust, that's going past the limit of freedom of expression. That's not the same as showing a caricature making fun of the Prophet Muhammad, which, yes, isn't great, but we show caricatures of Jesus, or we, again, teach evolution, which also goes against their values. So in no way can I say that this is going past the freedom of expression, or at least I can say that our team does not believe that that is so. If they cannot cope with this, they will not be able to cope with this after the inclusivity training that your team is proposing, as everything that we teach in said inclusivity training would go against their values. They would not be able to accept it. Then they are not able to accept it now, and they would not be able to accept it then. Um, Anybody from our team wants to add anything? Or I can keep going if not.
I mean, like adding to what he said, like even if we take for granted the premise that like that those caricatures go like they cross the line, they're too offensive, like that does not justify like that the Muslims turning around and like decapitating a teacher. Like that does not justify it. Just because the caricature like crossed the line, which we don't really agree with that, that does not justify violence. And as he said, like that same magazine also makes fun of Christians. You don't see them going around and like killing other people just because of it. And well, you also like try like create the premise that like Muslims don't feel like included. But throughout the 2010s, like Europe was very pro-immigrant. They were very welcoming. They were very generous to immigrants. Yet they, for whatever reason, refused to integrate. They refused to assimilate to European culture. And we believe that it's reasonable for Europeans to like demand that they assimilate to European culture. If they want to live in Europe and be treated as Europeans, they should try and behave like Europeans. And so a lot of the cases of Islamists, radical Islamists committing acts of terror, they tend to be second generation immigrants, meaning that even after these immigrants immigrate to another country, have children, those children grow up in the country, were born in the country, they are still refusing to assimilate. Like it seems like that they are fundamentally opposed to the idea of assimilating into Europe. And so if they are opposed to assimilating into Europe, then Europe has the right to like close the doors to them. It has the right to like say, no, we are Europe. We want to protect European values and European people and European culture. And so if you don't want to be a part of that, then you can go back home. And so addressing what they said about like the unethical, well, how it is unethical that they're being sent back to war zones, like we do agree that it's tragic, but let me ask you this question. If your house were burning down, would your first reaction be to like abandon your house and go look for another one? Or would it be to try and put out the fire?
That's a great point made by my teammate. And one thing, am I allowed to answer the question they've put in chat now, or is that for later?
That's for later. Yeah. So you've got
Okay.
one more minute.
I'm gonna metaphorically answer the question. Um, so let's hypothetically say that there are women and children like those we've seen in the video who have immigrated to European countries um, already, have already immigrated to European countries, and thus are living there. Now, the question regards the imposing tighter restrictions on immigration from Muslim countries now. So we would not be sending the already living here women and children back, but rather we would be preventing others from coming. But wait, whilst this may sound tragic, as we can accept that, that does sound tragic, this already kind of happens all the time as we've seen with examples of refugees traveling across the Mediterranean just earlier this year, where I believe several thousands of people sunk and tragically died. Um, Look, sending them back to their home isn't the greatest thing. But ultimately, as from Europe's perspective, we have to look out more for Europe. And we also have to look out for them, or we can try to look out for them. That is a secondary, but we will try to. And that's why we, as my teammate said, we want to not just have them flee their house, but rather to try to put out their fire. And we want to help them put out the fire rather than help them escape the house. And yes, and apart from that, I'd also like to say that um, uh, we don't necessarily agree with the fact that these Muslims should assimilate into European society. If they're already here, yes, they should. But if they want to continue coming over, we'd rather protect their culture and our culture and not have them have to change their entire culture to fit in with us. We just want to avoid them radicalizing and preserve the culture of both parties. We're not prioritizing European culture over Muslim culture, but we are prioritizing European safety over the safety of those outside Europe. And that's it. That's our closing statement. Well, my closing statement.
Okay, cool. Now, having finished with the rebuttals, the team against, no, wait. Yeah, the team in favor can now ask questions to the team against. Um, Depending on the number of questions, you can ask as many as you want. And the team against will answer those questions. And later, the team against will be able to ask the questions to the team in favor. So, yeah, team in favor, if you want to ask any questions, now is your time.
I go, or again, anybody else want to say anything? No? Cool. Okay, now the main question I have for you guys, what would you include in your inclusivity and diversity training program that's supposed to get these immigrants to feel more integrated into the European society? And how would you prevent this training from going against their core values?
Well, first we must ensure, because we must not promote the idea that Muslim core values actually go absolutely against European culture's values. We still agree that the Islam is a very is a religion that actually promotes peace. And then if we talk about measures that would promote the integration of different Muslim individuals into the European society would be, for example, putting them in touch with the community centers and creating meetings among local residents with these new immigrants. We can there can be meetings to ensure that there are like that friendships are established, that social dialogue it's taking place, and also to ensure their enrollment in the community, to ensure that they are not separated or create their own separate ghettos voluntarily, but instead try to actually feel welcome in the society they're trying to insert themselves in. I think my teammate Tao also wants to answer.
Also, so like these like programs wouldn't be like teaching them how to like change. We're not telling them like, okay, this is how like you have to give up all of your like Islam cultural values and kind of like, you know, um it's kind of more like teaching them how to respect the European values and like respecting this like freedom of expression and not having to resort like to violence because they're like, oh wow, well, in this like freedom of expression movement, they're insulting our religion. It's not. It's kind of like teaching them um, how to like accept that freedom of expression is a right in Europe and not, and it's not rooted um in like insulting the Muslim religion, but more like educating people like that. So we're not, yeah.
Okay, yeah, Mari had a question as well.
I mean, so you guys keep on insisting that like we simply have to like teach them, and like if we repeat it enough, like they'll start to accept it. But like you have to keep in mind like that is their religion. Like I'm not saying like the violence necessarily, but the beliefs are their religion. That's what they believe is like the truth of our existence. And like when you try to like teach them otherwise, it's like from their perspective, it's like why are these people trying to teach me something that which I know to be false based on my religion? Like for them to like properly assimilate, they need to like basically stop being Muslim. So how would you like overcome that?
I think that the team in favor of taking entire measures actually is trying to find like the Muslim values and the European values to be absolutely opposing, which I believe to be a fallacy because they again the Muslim religion is one that promotes peace and understanding. And
The
we,
jihad is mentioned in the Quran.
do you have a mention in the Quran that goes against European values?
I mean, the jihad, like the concept of like holy and physical war, is mentioned in the jihad, in the Quran. I mean,
Wearing a hijab goes against European values?
No, jihad.
Ji-
Jihad, not hijab.
Jihad is an extremist group absolutely separate from Muslims, and believing that all Muslims are in favor of the jihad is actually a generalization fallacy.
We do not believe that all Muslims are in favor of the jihad, but rather we are citing the quotes from the Quran that say that violence against those who blaspheme the religion, which is to say, go against the religion, is justified, which is mentioned several times. I could bring up specific quotes if you want me to.
The jihad or the Sharia?
Sorry. There is verses in the Quran which justify violence against those who blaspheme, which is to say, go against the beliefs of the religion.
Well, Europe is based, many countries in Europe are officially Catholic, and you can see texts in the Bible that promote bestiality or that promote.
I've read the Bible. I don't think that's true.
I've read the Bible too, and I believe that's true.
Wonderful. You're wrong.
It's an awful book, but anyways, I think you're also wrong.
See, look, I can take that. That's okay. You can believe that. Now, a
Okay,
Muslim would have to
let's
commit violence against you now.
let's just keep it like like centric, like one way, and after so like one person asks the question, another person asks, because you later have the chance to do it vice versa.
okay,
Um,
so basically, like, could you answer a question of like how are you meant to like overcome that difference of like a religion that like believes in the concept of jihad of like basically like defending their own religion, even if it means like attacking others who are not a part of it.
All religious Asian texts, in the end, from the Bible to the Quran, may have very, very old promoting ideas, may have, that actually say that you should not engage with non believers, but rarely any Catholic or Muslim individual follows to the end of the line everything that's said in these religious texts, and many Muslims are willing to integrate in these societies. And we should not believe that all Muslims are going to follow step by step the Quran, and we should not generalize that all of them are going to follow the jihad. Just as I, as a Catholic, don't follow, for example, promotions that are done in the Bible, such as that.
Yeah,
For
like you're kind of deflecting the question a little bit. Like the
no,
question is
it's
like
not.
how to overcome those
Not
who like are
not
following
Let,
exactly
let
word
her
for
answer.
word.
Let her answer. Let her answer.
Guys,
Let her answer.
and yeah, I believe we can make either like this the last question, or maybe Mark. Okay, you can ask one more question, but keep it really brief. Um, yeah, please.
Okay. Well, let me think how to phrase this as a question. Is it the same as you claim to not? Well, okay. Okay, fine. Let me phrase this differently. Where in the Bible does it inherently justify violence against non believers as it does so in the Quran? And when have we claimed that all Muslims follow the Quran word by word and that all Muslims promote the jihad? Those are two questions, but I mean, that works.
The Bible was the book that was used to mainly justify awful events such as the Crusade or the expulsion of the Muslim population from Spain. So again, if we are like retaking saying, oh yeah, all Muslims are bad, and Catholics, and for example, Catholics use this excuse and use the Bible, which also enforces that Catholics are heretics. And this was used as an excuse to actually kick them out of Europe already in history, and this had a toll also on European economy and society because they were already integrated and contributing to their society. So adding tighter restrictions will not solve the problem. Yes, Mark?
Look, it's bad inherently if Catholics or if Muslims justify their actions with little lines that are taken out of context from their books, both with the Crusades, both with the Jihad. We're not saying that they're different. Look, the only thing that we are saying is that the Quran clashes more with European values than the Bible, or that's not even what we're saying. We're just saying that any training program would not go against the possibility of Muslims being radicalized simply because there's nothing stopping them from being integrated in the society now, or at least that's the view that our team takes. Because what exactly is stopping them from being integrated now that would not stop them after this whole integration program, which, by the way, already exists in many countries for refugees?
Also, like we find your response to be fallacious. Like it's a straw man. Like just because Christianity did it in the past does not mean that Muslims are justified in doing it in the present.
Okay, I believe questions are done. Also, please respect the guidelines. One question, one answer. Don't go off on thousands of rebuttals and counter rebuttals. So I believe you in total asked about like 5 questions, if I'm not mistaken, uh, more or less. So in that case, the team against now gets to ask 5 questions as well. Please, everyone, try to keep it relatively brief because we need conclusions and evaluation in the end. So yeah. So team against, you can ask questions to the team in favor from now onwards.
I mean, Michael had mentioned, for example, like um, teaching, like no, like helping them, like save their homes instead of like escaping them or something. So I think, like, do you do you not think that it's more important, for example, like as a Europe, as the EU being like quite a powerful, obviously, organization or whatever, um, is it not more important, for example, instead of like limiting the immigrants that can come from these countries of like corruption or violence, do you not think that the EU has some sort of like responsibility to like help help these like countries in the Middle East that are like ridden with conflict or like corruption, instead of, for example, um, instead of I forgot what I was gonna say, but like yeah, like do you not think it's like more important, instead of kind of almost like punishing the immigrants by not letting them come into the EU, um, but rather like helping in those like countries where like conflict is like and corruption is the reason why they're trying to like leave. I don't know if that made sense. I feel like that didn't make sense.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Just the very simple answer to that question is that's exactly what we would be doing. We would be helping the countries that are riddled with corruption. We would be helping the countries that are war torn. No matter what the problem is in the country, it is ultimately solvable through sufficient intervention that would have to be peaceful, because otherwise we are just propagating the issue. Um, but yeah, ultimately the issue is always solvable, and there's no reason for it to be impossible to help these people in their home countries. That's exactly what we were saying we would do. We were not saying we would punish these immigrants by sending them back to these horrible places, but we would sadly be saying that might have to endure this for a little longer, so that their homes can be, well, habitable, so to say, for the future generations, because that's ultimately what we want to do. We want to preserve their culture, we want to preserve our culture, that are not necessarily clashing with each other, but that are beautiful both in their own separate ways. So we'd like to preserve each of them. We'd like to preserve each home nation for its people and for all people to visit in the future. So what we'd like to do is to create a, a good climate, political climate, obviously, is what I mean, um, in their countries, and to not jeopardize Europe in the process. Yeah,
May I add to his answer?
of course.
Okay, so yeah, basically what he said, like immigration is a symptom, and so I feel like it's better if we treat that disease as opposed to the symptom. Like the problem here is that their countries are unstable, and like that's the reason why they're immigrating. And so our primary focus should be to like address the fact that to address the reason why they're immigrating, as opposed to like the immigration itself. And so uh, furthermore, um, I forgot what I was gonna say, but like assume I said something smart.
Okay, I think Valentino was next with regard to asking questions.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask a new question. I wanted to know how your restrictions will also ensure the safety of the refugees who come in peaceful manners, and how you will ensure that they are still integrated into society, whom are like asylum seekers or refugees. That's my question.
Jerome, you want to answer?
Yeah, so let me just clarify that while tighter security measures, it's just tightening the security. It doesn't mean that we're completely like we're completely negating every single immigrant that's coming into the country. And as of now, European legislation on asylum for refugees, it's already pretty good. And in fact, people of the citizens are already complaining as we are accepting a lot of refugees already, as seen in protests in Spain, protests in the UK. So I wouldn't say right now there's literally no problem with accepting enough like refugees, and simply restricting it a little bit more. There's not going to be a problem in the acceptance of certain refugees, especially those that come in peaceful manners. As of we have mentioned again, tighter security doesn't mean absolutely no refugees allowed in the country.
And sorry, I'd like to quickly add to that response, just a little bit, just like widening it a little bit. Um, if there were some issue with these refugees coming in, apart from the already tighter measures, um, there's always the option of essentially holding these refugees temporarily, even more temporarily than they would be anyways, because they'd want to go back eventually, which would be in refugee camps, which is a word with many bad connotations. but we always have the possibility of improving upon that and learning as a human species. So we could, make more healthy refugee camps, to put it as such. I don't know how else I would put it, because usually that word does not have the best connotations.
Okay, next in asking questions is Carla.
Okay, I wanted to ask the question because the team in favor has presented the long-term solution of ensuring a safer international climate with which this team agrees. Yet, does the team in favor have any short-term pressure measure proposals that doesn't involve tire restrictions, which usually have a negative impact?
I mean, like if you want to see like the long term solution be realized, like you need to like start acting now. Like, and that's the reason why we want to like we're proposing like tighter restrictions now, because if we never do it, then the long term solution will never be realized.
Um,
Yeah, as Michael's kind of said, we're no, we're not proposing a short-term solution without tighter measures. We're not. Um, we want to tighten the measures to prevent such radicalization and such terrible events to happen in the future. So it's more of a long-term thing. In the short term, the only thing we could really do is try to promote inclusivity, like you guys have said, and try to promote the acceptance of each culture in Europe, Muslims and Muslims of European culture. But that's already really being done. There's no amping it up would not really help. We all know that. Um, so our short-term solution is our long-term solution. It's tightening measures to make sure this doesn't happen again. Jerome,
so the team.
I think Jerome wants to add.
Yeah, sorry, just it's just a small thing. You also mentioned that there were huge negative implications of this short-term solution. But I would just like to say that you didn't add up any evidence to suggest that. So, just pointing that out there. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, your team didn't either add up any evidence concerning that tightening the restriction measures would also be beneficial for Europe. But I think that Diego has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Carla. So my question goes out to the whole team. So you guys mentioned how the cultures are different, and you raised the question as to how we plan on educating people from different backgrounds. But I think you guys fail to see that education serves as a universal tool that transcends cultural and religious barriers. So additionally, I'm a bit concerned as why the opposing team keeps mentioning separation. This was previously, I was going to ask this earlier on, but I know, like, for example, Mark mentioned that they prefer to have each country stick to their culture, and that I think you fail to see the benefits of exchanging cultures and creating like this diversity amongst communities. So to me, it's like it seems like you guys are more concerned about losing cultural identity than the safety of EU nations and Islamic radicalization in Europe, which is kind of the whole point of this like meeting. So I guess like what I want to know is like why are you guys so opposed to having a more like peaceful and fair, ethical way to integrate people, immigrants, into our society instead of like tightening the restrictions, which could even cause more like agitation amongst Muslim people, which will just later cause more problems, right? So my question is basically like, why do you think that's better than having like these more fair and like open arms kind of solutions?
So I'll like to answer. Well, Diego, sadly, I think you just seem to have misunderstood our perspective, and that's okay. That's probably our fault. We may not have explained it clearly enough. No, we're not more concerned about losing cultural identity. No, we're not against peaceful relations in between the cultures. In fact, that's exactly what we wish to nurture through preserving both cultures. We want to promote a multicultural world, not one with a homogenous blob of culture, but rather one with separate beautiful cultures. And of course, these cultures intertwine, which is fine. That's great. But we would like to keep the beauty from each of them still visible, despite this connection. And apart from that, you've mentioned that we've focused more on this supposed separation of cultures than we have on the Islamic radicalization. But the thing is, what we want to do is to prevent this Islamic radicalization from happening by showing that we care about their culture too. We care about both cultures. We're not trying to marginalize them. No, we're trying to garnish better relations between the cultures instead. We're not trying to separate them. We're not trying to segregate them. Of course, that's not what we're doing. And then the other point that you've made, which is that by tightening restrictions, we would, have these tensions rise rather than lower them, which is what we aim to do. And again, that all depends on perspective. That depends on how we do it. As we've mentioned, we want to do it in such a way um, that we what was it? Yeah, that we tackle the root cause, not just the tip of the iceberg. We want to help them in their home countries, and so in such a way there would be no need for these tensions to rise. Mr, if you want to add anything on, if not.
Yeah, adding to what Mark said, like Diego emphasized the importance of education, but like let's not forget that one of the most infamous cases of like Islam radicalism was like the beheading of a school teacher. Like he was simply doing his job, which was to like try and like educate these Muslims and like how to like better assimilate to European society, and like they just turned around and like murdered him and decapitated him in public. And so also let's not forget that like what we're addressing right now is like we want more tight restrictions on immigration because we have identified the problem to be mass immigration. Like for example, France, it had a significant Algerian diaspora living there, and like they didn't cause any problem, like because they were relatively small numbers that allowed them to easily assimilate into like the greater French culture. But now that they're like coming in greater amounts, like mass immigration, that facilitates them to not assimilate, to instead stubbornly like stick to how it used to be back in their countries, and like that creates a clash that like they don't feel like they truly belong in the new country.
Okay, guys, I believe we're gonna start to wrap it up because it's really long. But basically, I think we're gonna go into conclusions. However, I checked the people who are on the call, and the two people who are supposed to conclude for the team in favor are no longer here, I believe.
Bruh.
So
I mean,
if the team, okay, if the team against can conclude maybe like in a minute, like closing statements, just conclude in a minute, and afterwards the team in favor also concludes in a minute, and we wrap it up. And team in favor, I don't know, whoever wants to conclude, you've got the floor to conclude. But I guess we'd start with the team against, if you're fine with that.
Carla, if you want to conclude, because I did the opening.
Sure. And my teammates can also take on the time if they want. In conclusion, this team stands absolutely against dire restriction measures towards Muslim in the immigration from Muslim countries, due to believing that this is going against the to this goes against giving humanitarian aid, receiving economic aid through labor through more through labor support when having labor shortages in Europe, and also goes against social and cultural understanding. Meanwhile, the opposing team has said that there will be separate that the cultures will separate between them, and they are beautiful cultures that should be separate. But instead, this team stands in favor of cultural dialogue, cohabitation, and understanding among these cultures, instead of just keeping separate from each others. I don't know if any of my teammates wants to give the finishing touches to this conclusion.
So yeah, I think Carla said exactly what we were thinking, and that's basically like what we think. We believe that the tightening of the borders and like the restrictions, right, will just create more tension amongst countries, which is the opposite of what we want to do. And instead of doing that, we can have a more like passive, a more friendly, open-armed solution, which would be educating, spreading awareness, having this intercultural diversity, which is the end game here. Because at the end of the day, I think the root cause of radical Islamic radicalism in Europe starts with education, right? So if we can target it at its root, then I think this problem won't have to be, um, yeah, and that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, team against. Now, team in favor, you've got a minute.
y'all okay if I go or Jerome, Michael? No, all good.
I mean,
You can
can
add on
you
after Jerome. It's fine.
Okay, yeah, go for it, Mark. Okay, then go for
Okay, so our team has proven throughout this discussion um, that our stance is the more reasonable. As Diego's mentioned himself, we wish to tackle this issue at its root, as our team has said we want to do the whole time. We want to tackle the issue at its root. We want to keep, as the other team has mentioned, cultural peace, um, not necessarily fully separate, as we've said, separate yet intertwined, but without homogeny, so as to not lose aspects of either culture. And we'd like to ultimately remove Islamic radicalization without heightening tensions between countries through, as the other team has said, economic aid, but without the inherent issue of letting potentially dangerous immigrants who may compromise European values into Europe. We want to solve this issue peacefully. We want to solve this issue in a way that cuts it down at the root and does not allow it to grow back again. Anyone want to add anything?
Yeah, and in the case of if there is a need for deportation, it could actually be seen as a more pragmatic response in order to address these challenges and to overall ensure the well-being and a sustainable integration of both existing and incoming populations. And yeah, I'm out of time, so yeah, we'll just end it there.
Okay, having said that, we've concluded this debate. Thank you so much to both teams. I guess we'll give you the results later down the line because I believe, yeah, certain of the moderators going to leave now. Um, because we have been talking for a long time. Also, feel free to use this for like listen for like 2 hours for cast for creativity or service or whatever you need it for. Please feel free to use it for as 2 hours. Having said this, thank you for joining today. This debate was really entertaining, really diverse perspectives, and really contradicting ones, which was really cool. I love the beef between Carla and Mark. It was really interesting to see in person. Anyhow, thanks everyone, and see you in the
Wait,
next
who
session.
won? Who won? Who won?
We're gonna discuss that and we'll
Whoever
let you
broke
know.
tighter, Jerome.
Bro,
Yeah, we'll let you
okay,
know later.
fair enough. Okay,
All right, that's
yeah,
good.
thank you.
Either way.
Okay.
Bye,
Thank you so
guys.
much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.